Snow comes too soon. Hello, everyone. I'm glad you're here. Please like and subscribe so I can tell more interesting stories. Now let's get started. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who remembers the sound snow makes when it swallows a wagon. But now, even in my dreams, I still hear it, that quiet cracking groan followed by a sigh, like the earth exhaling one last time. That was the moment I knew we were in trouble. We left Springfield, Illinois with the usual mix of blind hope and bad maps. It was May of 1846, and if you had a wagon, a dream, and maybe some extra oxen, you were halfway to California in your mind. I was one of 87 families' children, young couples. Some even brought pianos and wedding dresses. You know, because apparently nothing says manifest destiny like hauling a mahogany upright over the Rockies. The early parts of the journey lulled us. Wide plains, sunlit rivers, prairie dogs that popped up like nosy neighbors. It almost felt like a camping trip with too many aunts and not enough soup. The oxen were slow. The kids were loud. And every night smelled like smoke, sweat, and someone's burnt cornbread. But then we hit Wyoming. That's when things started to unravel like a bad quilt. Our leader, if you could call him that, was James Reed, full of big plans and bad luck. He was the type of man who could convince a bear to trade salmon for a dream of beachfront property. It was Reed who suggested we take the Hastings cutoff. I'll get to that bad idea in part 2. For now, just know that by the time we reached the Wasatch Mountains, we were behind schedule. And schedules were life or death out there. You miss your window, and the Sierra Nevada turns from a postcard to a predator. Historians still debate whether we could have made it if we hadn't paused so long in Salt Lake. Some say we lost precious days there. Others say we never stood a chance, shortcut or not. But what's undeniable is this: the snow came too soon. We were only a few miles from Truckee Lake, what you now call Donner Lake, when the sky decided it had had enough of us. The clouds rolled in like thick gray fists, and then the snow began. At first it was almost pretty, kids catching flakes on their tongues. Someone joked about a white Christmas, but by morning the wagons were buried to their axles. The trail vanished, our wheels spun in place. The animals panicked, then froze. Literally. One by one. I still remember brushing snow off the face of our lead ox, who stood there like a statue, his eyes glassy, his breath gone. We tried building ramps of logs and snow to keep moving. We tried shouting at the sky. We tried praying. But mostly, we just started waiting. Cold has a smell. It's not just air. It's bitter, metallic, sharp, like iron and pine needles. And cold changes people. It turns cheerful uncles into statues and strong men into children with cracked lips. That first week, we huddled in the wagons. They weren't built for this. The canvas tops sagged, the fire smoked, someone burned a family Bible for warmth, and someone else tried to eat boot leather. We thought the snow might pass, that the sun would come back. Spoiler, it didn't. Here's your historical fact of the day. The winter of 1846 to 47 was one of the harshest on record for the Sierras. Snowfall reached nearly 22 feet in some places. You could have buried a giraffe standing on a horse. We set up makeshift shelters, tree branches, animal skins, bits of canvas. It was like building a survival hut out of anxiety and hope. The lake froze solid. The silence was eerie. No birds, no wind, just the sound of children crying quietly, their mothers holding them close, whispering things like, "Just wait, help will come." It didn't feel like America anymore. It felt like another planet. I still had a small tin of salt pork. We rationed it like it was treasure. One bite a day. The taste was so strong it made my eyes water. It also made me laugh once because here I was, crying over a piece of pig that tasted like despair. There's your first joke. I promise they don't get much better. At night, the cold snuck into your bones like gossip. No matter how many layers you wore, it found the spaces between your ribs. I wrapped myself in a wool blanket so stiff it could have doubled as a doormat. Someone joked about inventing heated seats. I said I'd settle for heated socks and a different life. Odd fact of the day. A woman in our party brought along a full tea set and insisted on making formal tea every day for the first few weeks, right up until her teapot cracked in the cold, like it had decided it had had enough of our nonsense. There was talk of turning back, of building sleds, of walking out. But with the snow piling higher than the wagons, every step forward was a gamble with death. We weren't brave. We were stuck. Some families managed better than others. The Breens had a knack for making tiny fires out of wet bark. The Graves family somehow kept their spirits up by singing. I hated them a little for that. I also envied them. One night, I woke up to the sound of a baby not crying anymore. I won't say which family. Just know that we all heard it, and nobody said a word. It's strange what your brain clings to. I still remember the way the moon looked that night, glowing through snow-covered branches like an old oil lantern. I remember thinking, if I make it out of this, I'm never eating snow again. And then I did. Eat snow, 3 days later. Because thirst makes fools of us all. The snow didn't stop. Not that week, not the next. And by the time we realized we'd be here for months, the silence had changed. It wasn't waiting anymore. It was warning, and that, my friend, was just the beginning. The Hastings Shortcut. You ever make a decision so dumb, so wildly miscalculated that even your future ghost wants to slap you for it? Yeah, that was us, with the Hastings cutoff. Now I know what you're thinking. Why would anyone leave the established trail to follow a random guy's sketchy advice scribbled in a pamphlet? Good question. Answer: desperation, arrogance, and a sprinkle of bad luck. Lansford Hastings was a name folks tossed around like it meant something. He'd never actually taken his so-called shortcut, with a full wagon train, mind you. He just sort of imagined it, claimed it shaved off 300 miles, which in theory sounded great, like cutting your commute in half. But here's your authoritative historical fact. Hastings' route added weeks, not days, to our journey. It wound us through the Wasatch Mountains and across the Great Salt Lake Desert. Two places not exactly known for hospitality or food courts. James Reed, our overly confident de facto leader, was all in on the shortcut. Said it was bold, efficient, visionary. You know what else is visionary? Hallucinations from dehydration. When we split off from the main California trail near Fort Bridger, some tried to talk sense into us. Wait for more news, they said. Stick with the known road, they pleaded. But Reed had that glint in his eye like he was starring in his own Western. The man could have sold sand in the desert, and he basically did come to think of it. Anyway, we took the cutoff. And the cutoff took us for everything we had. The Wasatch was our first taste of wrong-turn hell. Trees too thick for wagons. Slopes steeper than my learning curve in this lifetime. It took us nearly 2 weeks to cut through 20 miles of brush and stone. Axes swinging, wheels breaking, tempers flaring. At one point, 2 families got into a full-blown screaming match over a broken yoke. I think someone threw a ladle. Historians still debate whether Reed's decision to press forward was blind optimism or a genuine belief in Hastings' route. Some think he was chasing prestige, imagining himself as the man who led settlers through the new gateway to California. Others think he just really hated listening to people tell him no. Either way, we followed him. Once we cleared the Wasatch, we hit the Salt Lake Desert. I'd never seen land that looked so flat and yet felt so cruel. It was white, endless. Mirages danced like ghosts on the horizon. You'd swear there was water ahead, but it was just more heat, more salt, more lies. Odd fact of the day: the salt crust is so blinding out there that some folks tied handkerchiefs over their eyes and walked backwards just to stay sane. One guy swore he saw a shipwreck in the sand. We laughed. Then we cried. Then we laughed again because someone farted, and that was the only joy we'd had in 4 days. The desert took more than our dignity. It took our oxen. The animals collapsed, tongues swollen. We lost wagons, food, people. I remember one woman, Mrs. Eddy, she sat beside her cart for hours after her last ox died, just brushing the harness like the beast might come back if she polished it enough. I don't remember her ever speaking again. We camped in the desert longer than we should have. The salt corroded everything: our feet, our tools, even our hope. We ran out of water. Folks tried to squeeze dew out of their clothes. I personally licked condensation off the inside of a cooking pot. Twice. Don't judge me. That whole shortcut was a mirage of a mirage. By the time we rejoined the main trail, we were behind schedule, half supplied, and emotionally cooked. But Reed, oh Reed, he acted like we were conquering heroes, said, "Now that's behind us, the worst is over." I wish I had a time machine just so I could go back and boo him. The thing about trail life is that it doesn't pause for pity. You don't get to sit around and reflect. You keep moving. You patch the wheel. You bury the child. You pour the last of the molasses and hope someone brought flour. That's the rhythm, until winter breaks it. We trudged onward: Utah, then Nevada. Mountains grew on the horizon like teeth. The Sierra Nevada. Beautiful, terrifying, and closer than we realized. That's when the Reed incident happened. James Reed, our bold visionary, stabbed a man. Yeah, you heard me. Franklin Graves, one of our own. The details are foggy even now. An argument turned violent. Reed drew his knife. Graves fell. Some say it was self-defense. Others say Reed snapped. Either way, we voted. Exile. And just like that, Reed was banished, sent ahead on horseback with barely enough food to reach California. Imagine that. Our leader gone, and we still had miles to go. I remember sitting by the fire that night, stirring beans that didn't exist, wondering if we were all cursed. Someone whispered that we shouldn't have taken the shortcut. I wanted to shout, "You think," but my throat hurt from breathing dust. That shortcut haunted us, not just for the delays, but for what it revealed. We were no longer a wagon train. We were splinters, each family its own floating island in a sea of desperation. No trust, no unity. Just tired, skinny people muttering in the dark. Joke number 2 for this section. At one point, someone suggested we rename the Hastings Cutoff to Hastings Cut Us Off from Survival. We laughed for a solid 3 seconds. Then a wheel snapped. Classic. We pressed on, hoping the mountains would go easy on us. But when we reached Truckee Lake in late October, the sky had other plans. That snow I told you about in part 1. It came fast, thick, relentless. We built cabins, dug pits, counted biscuits like misers, and all the while that shortcut loomed behind us, mocking us. If we'd stayed on the main trail, maybe we'd be sipping cider in California by now. Instead, we sat in our homemade coffins, watching flakes pile up like regret, trapped in the past. You ever hear snow scream? I have. Not with a voice, of course. It screams in other ways, through the cracking of trees, the groaning of frozen wood, the wind that whistles like it's got secrets it's dying to spill. That's what surrounded us at Truckee Lake. a silence so loud it made you flinch. We were officially trapped. By early November, the snow had sealed the mountain pass like a vault door. We tried digging hacking, even bribing it with curses and broken shovels. But nothing worked. The trails disappeared under drifts so deep you could lose a child in them literally. One morning, I watched the Breen boy vanish in a snowbank chasing a hat. Took 3 men and a rope to dig him out. When they finally pulled him up, his teeth were blue, and his first words were, "Did you save the hat?" We laughed, but it wasn't funny. It was survival humor, the kind that comes when everything's falling apart and your brain's trying to keep itself from doing the same. So we stopped trying to escape. We built shelters instead, and I used shelters generously. Some were just tilted logs leaned against boulders. Others were shallow cabins we dug down into like we were burying ourselves early. I shared one with the Graves and the Reeds, 4 walls dirt floor roof made from every bit of canvas bark and prayer we could find. Inside it was dark. Always dark, even at midday. We burned twigs, pine cones, even pieces of furniture. One guy chopped up a violin, said he preferred silence anyway. Authoritative fact. We were snowed in from late October until mid-April. Nearly 5 months of isolation starvation, and what one journal politely called dietary improvisation. We started rationing immediately. Flour, beans, bacon, whatever hadn't spoiled or frozen into bricks. Each person got a handful, once a day, if you were lucky. We melted snow for water, licked icicles. The kids made a game of it. Find the clean snow. I think it was the last game they ever played. And the smell. People always imagine freezing kills scent. It doesn't. It just changes it. Imagine wet fur, smoke mildew, and unwashed bodies mashed into a stew and left in a cold closet. That was our air. You got used to it or you didn't. And then there were the noises, not just the wind, but people, moaning, praying, muttering to themselves. I swear one man had an argument with a potato for 2 straight hours. He lost. Historians still debate whether we could have survived longer without resorting to eating the dead. Some think more disciplined rationing might have helped. Others say no amount of planning could have prepared us for the psychological breakdown. I'm in the second camp, because after a while, it wasn't just our bodies starving. Our minds were too. There was a man, we called him Old Man Foster, who swore he could smell bread in the trees. Said the pines baked it for the birds. We nodded and smiled. Let him believe it. That's how you survive. Sometimes you feed people lies when you don't have soup. One night, a woman pounded on our door frantic. Her husband hadn't come back from gathering firewood. We found him 2 days later, upright, frozen, still clutching a stick. The weird part, his hat was still on, not a flake on his coat, like he just stopped breathing mid-sentence. We buried him in the snow. Or tried to. The ground was frozen solid, so we mostly just covered him. Someone muttered, "He's warmer than we are now." Joke number 1. Not a good one, but we took what we could get. Odd fact. One guy kept a spoon tucked in his boot at all times, said it was for when the stew came back. He polished it daily, like a knight waiting for his sword. Spoiler, there was no stew. The days blurred. We tracked time by the size of the icicles and how long the candles lasted. Sometimes, I'd wake up and forget where I was. For a split second, I'd imagine I was home in Illinois, under my own roof, with my dog snoring at my feet. Then someone would cough blood, and I'd remember. We told stories to pass the hours. Mostly lies. Made up tales of green fields and roast turkey. One man swore he'd once seen the Pacific Ocean. We begged him to describe it again and again. I think he made up half of it, but nobody cared. It gave our stomachs something to dream about. There was a turning point, though, a shift. It happened around mid-December when the meat was gone and the children were starting to fade like ghosts. One of the Murphy girls fainted and didn't wake up for a whole day. We thought she was gone, but then she opened her eyes and whispered, "I dreamed of peaches." That's when the talk began. Quiet at first, whispers, hushed tones by the fire. Then one night, someone said it out loud, just said it clear as day. "If I die, you can eat me." We didn't laugh. We didn't even blink. That was the moment we all realized this wasn't a question of if. It was when. We were past survival, past desperation. We were in that quiet space between life and death where everything starts to feel negotiable. We hadn't done it yet, but we knew we would. That's how winter works in the mountains. It strips you down, layer by layer, morally, physically, until you're left with nothing but the question, how badly do you want to live? The campfire pact. I don't remember who said it first. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was Mrs. Murphy. Or maybe it was just the wind whispering our thoughts aloud so we didn't have to. But I do remember the silence that followed. If I die, you can use what you need. That was the phrasing. Use. Not eat. Not carve. Just use. Like we were borrowing a coat or a patch of cloth. Because saying the word made it real, and none of us were ready for that. That night, we sat around a fire made from bits of broken wagon wood, talking about death like it was a neighbor who might stop by. We weren't brave. We weren't monsters. We were just tired and cold and very, very hungry. See, hunger isn't just a feeling. It's a voice. It talks to you. First politely, maybe just a little more stew. Then it starts negotiating. You don't need both feet, do you? And then it screams. Our bellies had been screaming for weeks. By mid-December, half the children couldn't walk. They just lay there, wrapped in blankets that no longer warmed anything but the air around them. Every night, someone else stopped breathing. And every morning, someone else whispered, "We can't bury them anymore." The snow was too deep. The ground was stone. So we left them in makeshift shelters, wrapped in cloth, eyes closed, faces pale as milk. That's when the campfire pact was made. No ceremony, no signatures, just nods, silent acknowledgments. If we died, we gave permission. If we lived, we wouldn't ask questions. It was frankly the most honest agreement I'd ever been a part of. Historians still debate whether this pact was discussed openly by all or only among certain families. Some letters suggest it was unanimous. Others hint it was understood, but never spoken aloud. I say this when the air is that still, and your stomach, that empty words become unnecessary. That first night, we didn't do anything. We just knew it was coming. One of the younger men cried himself to sleep. Another sharpened a knife. Not for anything in particular, he claimed. Just to stay busy. We tried to keep routines. Morning snow collection. Fire duty. A game where someone would name a food, and we'd all describe it in painful detail. I once spent an entire hour describing apple pie crust, cinnamon steam, everything. When I finished, one man just stood up and walked out into the snow, said nothing. We didn't see him again. There was an eerie normalcy to it, the kind you only find at the edge of madness. One woman braided her daughter's hair every morning even as the child grew weaker. Another hummed lullabies to a bundle that no longer moved. Odd fact. One man claimed to have developed a sixth sense, said he could smell when someone was close to death, called it his farewell nose. We stopped inviting him to check on people. Then one morning it happened. A body. Cold. Still. Covered in a blanket of frost and silence. I won't say who. Not here. But someone said we should, and then stopped. No one finished the sentence. We didn't move for a long time. Just stared at the body. Not with horror. Not even sadness. Just a quiet resignation. Like when you realize the road's washed out and you have to swim. Eventually, someone stood. Then another. And before long, we all drifted into our shelters, leaving the snow to decide who we were. The next morning, the body was gone. No questions. No accusations. Just fewer growling stomachs. From that point forward, it became part of the rhythm. Death. Decision. Disappearance. And if you dared to ask, someone would hand you a bowl and say, "It's stew." Did I eat it? Of course I did. And before you judge me, before you think I'd never let me tell you something, you have no idea what you do. Not until your skin hangs loose. Not until your legs stop working. Not until your teeth ache from the cold and you dream of biting your own arm. You'd do what I did, and you'd pretend not to taste what you think you're tasting. That's how we survived January. Here's your historical fact. Nearly half of the Donner Party perished before spring. Most died from starvation and exposure. Others made it through on what nature and necessity provided. We lost track of dates. The sun didn't help. It barely rose. Just a gray glow behind clouds, like a lamp running out of oil. There were moments, strange, small moments that almost felt beautiful. A snowflake that landed on my finger and didn't melt right away. A child who laughed in her sleep. A day when the sky cleared just for an hour and we could almost pretend it was over. It wasn't. But we held on to those scraps. Joke number one for this section. Someone once said, "At least we won't have to diet when we get to California." We didn't laugh. But someone did mutter, "Not unless California is underground." Then we heard something, a crunch in the distance. Not snow, but boots, voices, men, rescuers. Not many. Just a scouting party. But enough to make us weep like fools. They brought food, blankets, words from the outside world. But they didn't have space for all of us, so we had to choose. And suddenly, the pact we made by the fire had another clause. If you get out, you come back for the rest of us. The Forlorn Hope. They called us the Forlorn Hope. Sounds dramatic, right? Like we were some heroic brigade marching into the unknown. Truth is, it was more like a sad lottery. Who was weak enough to die, but still strong enough to walk? 17 of us left the camp in mid-December, strapping makeshift snowshoes to our feet and food bundles to our backs. The rescuers had given us some jerky and a little hardtack enough to keep a flea alive, but not a person. Still, we had no choice. The children were dying. The mothers were fading. We had to move. I volunteered, not because I was brave, because I couldn't bear the sound of breathing that didn't have a future behind it. You ever hear that sound? A breath that doesn't expect the next one. It's worse than silence. Our little escape group looked like the saddest parade in history. Mismatched clothes, sunken faces, frostbitten toes. One man wore a bonnet, said it kept his ears warm and made him feel like a pioneer queen. We let him have that. The mountains greeted us with knives, jagged cliffs, snow drifts as deep as our regrets, and wind that sliced through wool like it was gauze. The first day, we moved 12 miles, the second 4. By the third, we were dragging our limbs like sacks of grain. That's when the first one fell. Not died, just fell. Couldn't go any further. We waited, gave him water, encouraged him. When we finally moved on, he stayed sitting in the snow, smiling, like he was waiting for a train. I still wonder if he saw something we didn't. By the 5th day, the food was gone, and so the conversations began. Quiet at first. If someone, doesn't make it, what then? Nobody wanted to say it, but everybody thought it. Historians still debate whether the forlorn hope truly planned for cannibalism before setting out. Some journals suggest it was discussed. Others insist it was necessity, not intent. I'll say this: you don't pack extra knives unless you've already asked the question. Then the blizzard hit. 3 days of white fury. We dug snow pits to sleep in, huddled like animals, taking turns being the windbreak. One woman, Sarah Graves, wrapped herself around her brother to keep him warm. By morning, he was dead. She didn't let go. We started dying in twos. First, Mr. Foster. Then Antonio, the teamster. Then Franklin Graves, who gave his daughters the last of his strength and said, "Walk, girls, walk for your mother." They did. Then we did it. We made the stew. Don't ask for details. Just know it happened. One man, Patrick Dolan, tried to offer himself before he died. Said, "If I'm going anyway, let me help you get there." He was laughing when he said it. That made it worse. Joke number 1. Someone asked, "Should we say grace?" No one did. The silence was our amen. Odd fact to this day, some argue whether the human body is truly nutritious enough to sustain survival long term. Apparently, there are more efficient forms of meat. I'll let the scientists bicker. We weren't chasing nutrition. We were chasing hours. We kept walking through canyons, across ridges, snow that glistened like it had a grudge. I remember hallucinating a bakery on the side of a slope. I could smell bread, hear the bell above the door. I wept when it disappeared. One night, someone told a story about roast goose. We made them stop. Another day, we found animal tracks. Rabbit, maybe. We followed them like they were gospel. Lost them in the rocks. One of the girls, 15 maybe, started muttering about feathers in the snow. We thought she'd found a bird. Turned out it was her glove unraveling. We lost more people. Buried some under branches. Left markers, crosses, prayers. Others we just left. When you're that far gone, grief becomes a luxury, like tea or clean socks. Eventually, we reached a ridge, could see the valley, civilization, farms, smoke in the distance. I remember falling to my knees, not in joy, in disbelief, like my body didn't trust my eyes. That's when we saw the man on horseback. He looked at us like we were ghosts. Maybe we were. He brought help, food, blankets, a trail back to safety. We stumbled into Johnson's ranch weeks after leaving the lake. Out of the original 17, only 7 survived the full journey. They fed us slowly, carefully. You can't just dump stew into a starving man. It'll kill him. We sipped broth like it was liquid gold. I don't even remember chewing for the first week. We slept on hay, heard birds again, felt sun that didn't hurt. But peace didn't come with the bread, because we'd left people behind, and we'd brought back the truth, that the ones still at the lake were dying. We had to go back. Rescue comes in pieces. The first rescue party left not long after we arrived at Johnson's ranch. And no, I didn't go with them. My feet were still bandaged and black in places they shouldn't be. But I promised them, if you get there, tell them I'm coming. What they found at Truckee Lake was worse than any of us imagined. I thought we'd left behind death despair and desperation in the snow. But apparently, the snow liked visitors. It had only gotten hungrier since we left. The first rescuers returned with 23 survivors, mostly children, starved, frostbitten, wide-eyed, and silent. Their faces haunted me. Blank, sunken, blanketed in dirt and shame. The rescuers said The cabin stank of smoke. And something else? Something they wouldn't name. One of them threw up just describing it. Another said the kids didn't blink for a whole day. They left supplies behind, promised to come back. But deep down, we knew some wouldn't live long enough to be saved. The second rescue team went in February. This time, I forced myself to go. My legs barely worked. I couldn't feel 3 of my toes, but I had names etched into my bones, people I loved, people I owed. I remember the journey back, not as a trail, but as a memory warped by frost. The trees seemed taller. The snow seemed thicker, like the mountains had grown teeth since we left. When we reached the lake, I didn't recognize it. The shelters had collapsed. The smoke was gone. It was quiet, too quiet. I called out names. No one answered. Then a face appeared in the doorway of one collapsed hut, Mary Donner. She looked like a ghost made of twigs. When I hugged her, she didn't move, just whispered, "I saved you some." I didn't ask what she meant. Inside, it was worse. Piles of bones, ash-covered kettles, spoons that no longer pretended to be for soup, and silence. So much silence. There's an odd fact for you: silence has a weight. In that cabin, it pressed on your chest like a stone. You couldn't cry. Crying would have felt disrespectful, like playing music at a funeral you weren't invited to. We gathered who we could. Some too sick to walk, some too far gone to eat. A few refused to come, said they belonged to the snow now. One woman threatened to bite a rescuer if they made her leave. Another begged us to take her child instead. Only her child. We did. That second trip out was slower, heavier. We lost 2 on the way. Buried them beneath pines with crosses made from burned shovel handles. By the third rescue, most of us had memorized the trail. We could walk it blindfolded. I did it again in March, and again in April. Each time the group we brought back was smaller. By then, word had spread. The cannibal party, some papers called us. The Donner Party became legend, a punchline, a cautionary tale. Something people would joke about at dinner parties. Pass the leg, haha. I wanted to punch those people. Historians still debate whether the worst choices were made at Truckee Lake or long before. Was it Hastings' fault, Reed's poor planning, bad luck, or just winter doing what winter does? Honestly, all of the above. But I'll say this, the rescue didn't come as one moment. No trumpets, no sunlight breaking through clouds like divine forgiveness. Rescue came in pieces, in boots crunching on snow, in cold hands lifting warmer ones, in blankets that didn't smell like death, in little sips of soup. It came slowly, too slowly for some. One girl died 2 miles from safety, just sat down in the snow and said she needed to nap. We tried to wake her. She smiled and whispered, "Tell Ma I'm warm now." We didn't have the heart to tell her Ma had died weeks ago. You'd think that once you reached the valley, once you tasted bread and touched grass, that the pain would vanish. It didn't, because you brought it with you. Every time you passed a frozen stream, you remembered the place where your friend died. Every time someone said pork, you winced. Every winter after that, the wind sounded like weeping. Joke number 1. For this section, someone in town asked me if I'd like to invest in a meatpacking business. I said only if the meat didn't talk back. They didn't laugh. I did. Then I walked away. And then there was James Reed, remember him? The man we banished before the snow. Turns out he made it to California, gathered supplies, lobbied for rescue efforts. Some say he saved dozens of lives. Others say he just did it to clear his name. Historians still argue about it. I don't, because he showed up. That's more than I can say for most. Odd fact. Of the original 87 people in our party, only 48 survived. That's barely half. And of those who lived, most were children. I guess kids are better at forgetting. Or maybe they just hadn't learned shame yet. The last trip to the lake happened in April. By then, all that remained were bones and memories. We buried what we could, marked what we couldn't, and walked away. Some of us limped into obscurity. Some told the story over and over until they believed it wasn't their fault. And some, like me, just went quiet. Because what could we say? That rescue came, yes, but not all of us survived it. Survivors in shadow. You'd think the worst part was behind me once I reached California soil. But no one tells you what it's like to survive when half your heart's still buried in snow. I stepped into spring like a ghost. Sun on my face. Green hills rolling out in front of me, birds singing. Like the world hadn't just swallowed us whole. Everyone smiled. Everyone clapped me on the back. You made it. You survived. But I didn't feel like someone who survived. I felt like someone who had been hollowed out and stitched back together with silence. At first, people wanted to hear everything. Was it true? Did you eat them? How did it taste? One guy offered me money to tell my story at a saloon. Said he'd even buy me dinner. I told him, only if it's not familiar. Joke number one. He didn't laugh. Neither did I. The newspapers called us ghouls, savages, wretches with knives and no God. They wrote our names next to words like barbarism and madness. But they didn't mention the mothers who tore their own sleeves to wrap a freezing child's feet, or the fathers who gave away their last bite so someone else might live an hour longer. They didn't talk about the girls who sang lullabies to no one, or the brothers who built fires over bodies because the ground refused to open. They just wanted headlines. Authoritative historical fact. The Donner Party became the most infamous case of survival cannibalism in American history. For decades, it was taught in schools as a warning. Don't trust shortcuts. Don't defy nature. Don't go west unprepared. But somehow, nobody talked about what happened to the ones who came back. I mean, how do you return to life after living in the dead? For months, I couldn't eat meat, couldn't sit by a fire, couldn't even look at snow without wanting to scream. I'd close my eyes and see icicles forming on eyelashes, frost growing on lips. I started walking in my sleep, mumbling names I'd promised to carry. Some of the children forgot, or tried to. They played, they laughed. Kids are like that, resilient to the point of magic. But the rest of us, we wore it on our skin like an extra layer. Historians still debate whether the trauma we carried shaped the culture of early California. Some say our silence bred a generation of stoics, quiet, hard people who worked the land like it owed them something. Others say we were simply broken and never fully repaired. I don't know. I just know I stopped talking. For a while, I lived near Sacramento. Tried to farm. Tried to forget. But winter would come, and I'd wrap the windows in canvas like we did in the mountains. I'd sleep with a knife under my pillow, just in case. I once spent an entire afternoon watching a stew boil. Never ate it, just watched it. The smell made my hands shake. Odd fact. One of the survivors, Louis Kesberg, was accused of murder, even cannibalizing people before they died. He won a defamation lawsuit years later. But by then, he was already a pariah. His children grew up with people crossing the street to avoid them. I bumped into him once. He looked older than God. I nodded. He nodded back. We didn't say a word. What could we say, remember, when we both lived through hell? That doesn't really start a conversation. Some of us kept journals. Others gave interviews. Me, I stayed quiet for years. Then one day, I started writing names. Just names. Everyone we lost. Everyone we carried. I pinned them to my wall like stars on a map. That was my confession. You want one more joke? Okay. I told someone once I went on a little winter diet. Lost 30 pounds, and a couple moral boundaries. They didn't laugh. I did. Then I cried. Sometimes that I think about what would have happened if we hadn't taken the shortcut, if we'd waited a week less, moved a little faster. Would we have made it? Would there even be a story to tell? Maybe not. But here's the thing. Survival isn't just about food, or fire, or even will. It's about the stories you carry, and how much of yourself you're willing to lose to keep going. Me, I left pieces of myself up there. In the trees, in the snow, in the echo of a child's voice calling out for mama when mama stopped answering. California never felt like home after that. Too warm, too loud, too alive. But I stayed. I lived. And that was its own kind of punishment. The story of the Donner Party isn't just about snow starvation and survival. It's about what happens when ordinary people are pushed past every limit they thought they had. It's about choices made in silence and darkness, in hunger deeper than words. We went west, chasing a dream, but the mountains didn't care. The shortcut didn't care. And winter never negotiates. What began with hope ended in whispers. In a cabin, buried in snow, where fire flickered over eyes that no longer opened and hands too weak to hold on, let go. And those of us who lived, we carried more than memories. We carried shadows, regrets, names spoken only in dreams. But I also carried something else, a promise that I'd tell the truth, that I'd remember the ones who didn't make it, not as monsters or myths, but as people. As mothers, brothers, daughters. As tired souls who didn't ask to be remembered for what they ate, but for how long they fought to live. So if you've stayed with me this long, thank you. Close your eyes now. Picture the snow fading, the trees opening, the sound of wind softening into birdsong. Breathe with me, because we survived. And sometimes that's all you can do.